I was sad. Evan crashed his drone. Hi, I'm Seth. I own Underline Photography. I'm a local photographer to Edmond, Oklahoma. I specialize in exotic and luxury high-end automotive work. I was recently tasked with shooting a client's McLaren 720S Performance. Very beautiful car, red color, just really unique. And so I wanted to do this car justice, and I wanted to find a spot that I hadn't photographed at yet. And being in Oklahoma, that can be kind of difficult sometimes. So typically how I do my due diligence is I search through Google Earth. So probably about 2 weeks ago, I came across this very unique place. It looked to be fenced off, closed off. I didn't think I'd have access to it, but I was so intrigued by the possibilities that, just from the images that I could get from this place, judging by the 3D imaging from Google Earth, that I had to dive into it a bit more. I wasn't just going to accept, oh, it's fenced off, you can't use it. No, I had to press forward and see if there was any way I could get granted access through it, whether it was local law enforcement, whether it was the property owner. I had to find a way in. So what I did was I contacted my insurance representative. He is very, very good about finding information as far as like land ownership or things like that, business history. So I contacted him, and he gave me the property owner's personal cell phone. So I spoke with the gentleman one evening, and I said, hey, is there any way I can get in here? Do you have access? Is there a key? Or like, what can I do to take a vehicle onto this property? And he told me that they had tried to fence off the property many, many times, and just people in the area kept breaking in. Apparently I wasn't the only one drawn to the location. So the front entryway, all the fencing had been kind of bashed in. It literally looks like somebody drove a van through the front of the fencing. So that left a wide enough opening to bring a vehicle in there. And I did shoot my client's McLaren 720S there. Turned out wonderfully. I loved it. And so with Evan coming through town, I figured, well, who better to share this location with, because I don't know anybody else who's photographed anything there or even heard of the place. So I decided to bring Evan out there with his RS6 and me and my RS3, and I figured we could collaborate and come up with some really unique photo ops. And I can't even try to calculate the square footage. This place is massive. So I brought Evan down there, and we not only got some pretty cool photos of our cars there, but we actually went through each individual building and explored and really went through the entire property and saw everything the place had to offer. And it was just such a unique experience, seeing such a huge industrial corporate area fall into just the absolute pits of disrepair. There's just nothing left of it. Ceilings are caved in. Machines just abandoned, inoperable, wiring ripped out of walls. I mean, think of your scariest horror movie and give it an industrial spin, and that's what it looks like. Going through some of the buildings, there are some really just interesting things. Like when you think of an abandoned industrial like dairy plant, it's really hard to imagine some of the things that we saw because they were just so unpredictable. In one building, we were walking through a corridor, and there was just tons of paper stacked up on the floor, like just compacted. And in the middle of it, Evan pointed it out to me because I had damn near lost my life. There was probably about a 18, 20-inch diameter hole in the floor, just right in the middle of it. And we looked down, we tried to illuminate the bottom of it. Very difficult to see, there was absolutely no light down there. But Evan, with his laser pointer, we were able to see the bottom. And if I had to guess, probably 30 feet straight drop, and there's like water and who knows what down there. It was gross, but yeah, it's just a huge hole. just dead center in the middle of this hallway, really creepy and weird. Going through another building, looking into this room, so there's like a narrow hallway, and it kind of opens up into this room. And I noticed there was a bit of light spilling out from the left into this room. And so as we're walking down, it looked to be a giant container that was mounted flush to this wall. Looked like it had literally just been ripped out of this wall. But the issue with that is this hole was probably 12 to 15 feet tall. It was not like something that a person or a car or even a truck could have done. Like, it was a massive hole just ripped out through this wall. Obviously we got some really cool photos there because the entire scene was really dark, and you had this little light spillage kind of coming in, and just made for a really cinematic image. Going a bit down further in that same area, there are these giant metal containers, possibly some sort of silo. I don't know the proper terminology for it, but it's a giant metal container that kind of expanded out from the bottom up, and they were really tall. They protruded through the roof probably 50 feet in the air. Like, they were incredibly tall, and the bottoms of them were open, and there were probably a 4-foot gap between the opening and the floor. So, or maybe 5 foot. It was relatively easy to stick your head in there and peek around, as we did, and shine our light in there. You know, it went up super high, but the acoustic characteristics of these containers were really unique. When you think of an echo, you think of something like, you know, yelling down a canyon or something like that. When you make a noise in a metal container that doesn't have a big diameter and it's really long, it makes some really crazy sounds. So of course we were smacking it with flashlights and yelling at it, and you know, just having fun with it.
Yo! I can't even see it.
But the acoustic properties of that were really interesting, and to find something of that just in the middle of this abandoned facility is just, you can't really anticipate that. In the back of the property, there was a building, and granted, there were various, you know, lengths and widths of loading ramps kind of throughout the property going into different buildings. However, in the back, we noticed that there was a rather wide ramp, so that ramp led into a really open area with just like a elevated concrete floor, and then it was kind of open on the side. It had sort of like rafters at the top. Wasn't covered super well, but it gave a really interesting kind of lighting perspective. And so Evan and I looked at this ramp and we thought, I think that is wider than our you know, our wheel track for the cars. So we thought maybe we could try and fit them up there. And barely, just, and I mean, when I say barely, I mean one wrong turn of the wheel and there would have been wheel rash. We had to spot each other up this ramp because the tolerances were so tight. Horrible idea. Don't do that. It was very, there was a lot of anxiety involved in making this happen. So we get both of the cars up there somehow, Evan's RS6 especially, because that is a big car. So we make it into this area on top of this concrete base and this kind of open warehouse sort of situation. And as we pull in, we kind of notice to the left that there's just this really suspicious pallet of barrels. You know, these blue kind of 55-gallon plastic drum looking things. And we look over at it, and one side of them looks pretty well composed, while as you look at the other side, it's almost completely deteriorated, and whatever was in them at one point has completely expired and just turned into like disgusting sludge. Like, I can't even explain it. It was like kind of like a off-white color, and it just spilled all over the pallet. And I want to say there were 3 or 4 barrels, and they had all just completely deteriorated and just kind of melted all over the side of this. And it looked like some kind of weird toxic waste experiment. Like, it was just gross. It's just kind of confusing to look at because part of the barrels are completely intact. So Evan and I parked our cars in there, and we got some really neat photos. And after that, we had pretty well explored most of the property, and Evan felt up to the challenge of trying to fly his FPV drone through some of the openings of some of the buildings. We felt like we had a pretty decent lay of the land and that there were a lot of good opportunities for cool drone transitions to fly through the buildings. And so Evan had made a few rounds and was feeling pretty confident in his flight path. However, he was making a bank up and kind of back down, and on his way back down there was a power line that he did not account for. We'll say it jumped out and got the drone, and so it hit the drone smacked the ground because it was thrown off balance, tumbled a ways, and I guess in the process had split open one of the batteries that were on the drone, so the drone caught fire and was burned pretty badly. Thankfully he was able to save the GoPro. All the footage is intact, everything is okay. The drone is somewhat salvageable. We believe there's some circuitry damage in the board on the drone, but the frame of it is still in pretty good shape. It wasn't totally burnt to the ground, it just smoked a lot. So he was able to separate the GoPro and the battery from the drone itself before it was all completely lost. So there was that. In the farthest building off to the south, it was kind of weird. It was a lot of just really open, kind of bare concrete areas. It looked like parking, but there were a lot of shop doors and then a lot of like personnel doors through there as well. And it just led to big open kind of concrete chambers. And I personally, I don't really have any kind of corporate industrial background, so I couldn't imagine what that could be used for, but it just, it looked weird and just kind of out of place. So the entire experience was really, really unique because it's not every day that you get to see what 15 years of neglect and abuse looks like to a property and a facility, and that coupled with the fact that it was a dairy plant and like this weird industrial environment, just it was just kind of weird. It's hard to explain really without you physically being there. But it was very interesting, definitely intriguing, and the creative possibilities that you could explore in that property. I mean, man, get me a strobe and a good prime lens and I could spend weeks there and I'd never take the same photo twice. So that was a fantastic experience. I'm really glad I got to share that with Evan.